Land remembers everything. Every fence post pulled, every well dug, every name that was never written down but spoken over it for generations. The land holds IT. It was October in Lavaca County, Texas. 1958. The kind of October that smells like dry grass and cooling earth, where the pecans are just starting to fall and the air has that first edge of something honest in it. The cotton had already been picked. The fields stood bare and pale under a sky that couldn't decide between blue and gray. She was 11 years old, small for her age. She had her grandmother's eyes, dark, still, and patient in a way that made adults uncomfortable. Nobody knew her name yet. Her name was Cora Del Hutchins. She lived 3 miles east of Hallettsville on a 280-acre tract her grandfather had broken from hardpan caliche back in 1909. The farmhouse was built in 1914, 2 rooms added in 1931 when her father was born, a porch added in 1947 when her mother finally asked for one. The tin roof had been repainted 4 times. Cora knew, because she had helped with the last 2. Her father, Raymond Hutchins, had died the previous February. Not dramatically. He went out one morning to check the water line on the south pasture and didn't come back. Heart. He was 43 years old. The doctor bill was $180. The funeral was $310. The bank loan on the property was $4,200, taken out in 1951 to buy a used Massey Ferguson 35 that Raymond had coaxed another 7 years of work out of before it finally gave up the previous spring. Her mother, Dolores, had tried. She had really tried. But she was a woman alone in 1958 in Lavaca County, which meant that the men at the feed store gave her advice she didn't ask for and credit she couldn't get. By August, she had missed 2 loan payments. By September, the 3rd, Cora had washed all of it from the kitchen table where she did her schoolwork. She had a composition notebook, black and white marbled cover, bought at Mercer's 5 and Dime in Hallettsville, and she had been writing things down since she was 9. Not a diary, more like a ledger. Dates, numbers, observations. She had written down the loan amount. She had written down the payments missed. She had written down what the land could carry and what it couldn't. She was 11, and she understood their situation better than most adults were willing to. The man from Continental Trust Bank in Victoria arrived on a Wednesday. His name was Gerald Pratt. He was 41, wore a tan suit that was clean but slightly wrong for the weather, and carried a clipboard with a carbon copy form already half filled out. He had kind eyes and a professional handshake, and he was very, very busy. He sat across from Dolores Hutchins at the kitchen table and explained, in measured tones, that the bank had a process to follow. He said he was sorry about Raymond. He said it sincerely. Cora believed that. He said that the property would go to auction on October the 14th. He said they would get a fair price. He said there were programs. He used the word programs 3 times without ever explaining what any of them were. Cora was sitting at the far end of the table doing arithmetic. She wasn't hidden. She wasn't invisible. Gerald Pratt simply didn't register her as someone who needed to be addressed. She looked up once and said, "What's the reserve price going to be?" Gerald Pratt looked at her the way men in suits looked at children who asked questions. Not unkindly, just briefly, the way you look at a dog that has made an unexpected sound. "That's handled by the auction house, sweetheart," he said, and turned back to her mother. He was gone inside 20 minutes. The carbon copy he left behind said the auction was set for October 14th. The reserve price was not listed. Cora wrote the date in her notebook. Then she wrote, "Find out reserve." I want to pause here for a second, because if you've ever been in a room and said something true and watched someone look right through you, not out of cruelty, just out of the quiet assumption that you weren't quite worth the full turn of their attention, then you already know how that kitchen felt. This is one of those stories. The kind that don't get told loudly. The kind that happened in a county nobody's making documentaries about, to a family nobody wrote a newspaper column for. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I've been hearing from people in places I never expected, and that means more than I can say. Now, back to Cora. Nobody helped her. That's the part that matters. She didn't have a mentor or a guardian angel or a lawyer uncle. She had her composition notebook and 3 weeks and a bicycle with a bent front fender that pulled slightly left. The first thing she did was ride to the Lavaca County Courthouse in Hallettsville. It was a Tuesday, and school was in session, which meant she told her mother she was going to the library. That was not entirely untrue. The courthouse had a reading room adjacent to the property records office, and Cora Hutchins spent 4 hours in it. She was looking for comparable sales. She had read the phrase in a farm circular her father kept in the desk drawer. She didn't fully understand it yet. By the end of that Tuesday, she did. In the 18 months prior, for properties in Lavaca County had gone to bank auction. She wrote down all 4: acreage, location, sale price, reserve price. She noted that the reserves had been set at between 38 and 44% of the county tax assessment value. She didn't know if that was normal. She wrote, "Is this low?" The second clue came from a man named Delbert Koss, who ran a soil and feed supply on the highway south of town. Cora had known him her whole life. He'd sold her father's seed corn for years. She stopped in on a Saturday morning and asked him, with the particular directness of 11-year-olds who have run out of time for indirectness, what he thought the Hutchins land was worth. Delbert Koss had a wire-bound notebook of his own behind the counter. He opened it without being asked. He said the South 40 of her family's tract had the best natural drainage he'd seen in that part of the county. He'd always told Raymond that. He said with a dry year coming, and he believed a dry year was coming, that drainage was going to matter. He said if he were buying, he'd pay $38 an acre for the whole parcel without blinking. She wrote, $38 per acre times 280 equals $10,640. The reserve Gerald Pratt's bank had set, which she'd found, eventually, in the courthouse filing, was $4,800. Total. The third clue was the Massey Ferguson. She'd assumed it was dead. Everyone had. But Cora had watched her father work on that tractor for years, and she remembered something he'd said in January, 2 weeks before he died. Only the injection pump, I think. Only the pump. She found a Massey Ferguson service manual in the barn, 1953 edition, oil-stained, and she looked up the injection pump. She wrote down the part number. She found, in a farm equipment catalog her father had received in December, that a replacement injection pump for a Massey Ferguson 35 cost $47. The tractor wasn't dead. It was $47 broken. Nobody had checked. The auction was held on the morning of October 14th, on the property itself, the way farm auctions were held in those days. About 30 people stood in the front yard. Gerald Pratt was there from Continental Trust. The auctioneer was a man named Roy Stiller, who wore a BOLO tie and had done this particular kind of work for 20 years. He was not a villain. He was just efficient. Dolores Hutchins stood near the porch. She had dressed carefully. That detail was told to me by someone who was there as a boy. He remembered her standing very straight in a dark blue dress. The bidding opened at the reserve for $1,800. A local land speculator named Harlan Boggs bid $5,100 almost immediately. A representative of Continental Trust bid $5,400. Then a small voice from near the fence said, $6,000. Roy Stiller stopped. Everyone turned. Cora Hutchins was standing with her back to the fence post, both hands holding her composition notebook against her chest like a shield. She was 11 years old. She was wearing her school shoes. There was a silence, not long, maybe 4 seconds, but the kind of silence where you can hear people recalibrate. Someone asked where she'd gotten the money. She had $6,000 in a cedar box in her bedroom, which was the sum of everything her grandfather had left her mother in a savings account that Gerald Pratt's paperwork had somehow not found, combined with $1,400 that Delbert Koss and 4 other men in the county had quietly placed into Dolores's account in the week prior after Cora had shown them her notebook. Nobody outbid her. The final price was $6,000. Continental Trust had estimated the land value in Gerald Pratt's intake form at $5,800. Delbert Casa's number, $38 an acre, put it at $10,640. The bank had left $4,640 on the table. Gerald Pratt did not say anything when it was over. He collected his clipboard and walked to his car. He was not a bad man. He had just never thought to ask the right questions. The Hutchins family kept the 280 acres. In the spring of 1959, Cora's mother hired a mechanic from Yoakum to replace the injection pump on the Massey Ferguson 35. The part cost $47, plus $12 in labor. The tractor ran for another 11 years. Cora finished school in Hallettsville, placed second in the county in mathematics in 1964, and attended Sul Ross State on a partial scholarship. She came home when she was 24. She didn't make a speech about it. She just came home. By 1971, the family had acquired another 60 acres on the east side. The Delaney parcel, which came available after old Roy Delaney passed, and Cora negotiated the purchase herself. She paid $41 an acre. Fair price, maybe $1 under. People in Lavaca County knew the story. They didn't tell it loudly. They told it the way things get told in small towns, gradually, sideways, with details added and subtracted depending on who was telling it and why. The version I heard had some things different. The amount of money. The number of people who'd contributed. One version had Delbert Coss making a speech at the auction, which he did not. What they all agreed on. She had a notebook. She had read it carefully. She had not been wrong about a single number. She never mentioned Gerald Pratt again. Not once, in any version of the story. There's something about land that clarifies people. Not in the way they talk about it in poems. Not the poetry of sunsets and seasons, though those things are real. It's something more stubborn than that. Land asks you to pay attention. It doesn't reward cleverness or speed. It rewards the person who writes things down and checks them twice and shows up the next morning anyway. Cora Hutchins was 11 years old when she understood that nobody was coming to save her family. That the people with the clipboards were not her enemies. They were just indifferent, which is a different thing, and in some ways harder to argue with. She argued the only way she knew how. Quietly, with numbers, in a composition notebook from Mercer's 5 and dime. The land is still in the family. I was told that by the person who told me this story. They said it like it was the least surprising part. Maybe it is. Maybe some things, if you hold on to them carefully enough, just stay.